welcome to another edition of Within WordPress, the podcast that you like to listen to because you're learning a lot about not just WordPress, but also about the people behind. Today's guest is Niels de Blau. I know Niels for quite a while, but for most people, you are entirely unknown. So probably good to start with an introduction and welcome to the podcast.
So I'm Niels, and thank you for having me at Remkes. As you said, we know each other for quite a while.
Yeah.
I think I first met you at WordCamp Netherlands 2016
Yeah.
in Utrecht. I was like, there's this giant walking around in a volunteer skirt. Who's that?
Yeah. Yeah.
And as you said, I'm not famous in the WordPress world, but in the Dutch community, I try to be visible and try to contribute.
Yep.
I do talk a lot at WordPress and WordCamp Netherlands, and I've spoken at some local meetups. And I've once done a session at WordCamp Europe, which was going to be the first one in Porto, but it was moved to an online-only version. So I had a lightning talk about logging.
Yeah.
So it was a bit disappointing to have an online audience just for that, because I was really excited to be on stage at WordCamp Europe. Didn't go that way.
Yeah. That was disappointing for a lot of people, I would say. Myself included, being on the organizing team. I have zero desire to organize an online event. I don't mind being there as a presenter, but I don't enjoy being responsible for the whole online thing. And so from an organizer standpoint, that edition was disappointing as well.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And I believe, like, in the grand scheme of things, it was like a good addition. Like, you're being confronted with a lot of changing situations. Like,
Yeah.
can it go on? Can it go on? A lot of uncertainty.
Yeah.
And I think for a first online event, it was amazing.
Yeah. And
They had so many good sessions, and the technical parts worked.
Yeah.
I think everyone was like, oh, this is something new. Let's try it.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, it was interesting, but I'm glad we had WordCamp Europe in Athens months ago.
I agree.
And was much better this way.
Yeah. Yeah. The interaction is quite different if you're in real life versus staring at a screen. However, this works, but it's just different. It's a different energy for me.
Yeah.
You said, so we met in 2016. I think I knew of you before that, but what I'd really like to have the listeners and viewers know is you do work within WordPress. You have I would say, a very special role and a very nice expertise in that role. So maybe share a little bit about that, because the company you work at, has a very interesting profile.
Right. So I'm CTO at Level Level, which is a bespoke WordPress agency from the Netherlands, from Rotterdam. And I've grown into this leadership role in the past year. So before that, I was from a development background.
Yep.
Programming since as long as I can remember, since I was a kid. Programming chatbots for IRC with my friends to hang out at 13, 14 years old, trying stuff, having fun.
Yeah.
And I got into the whole programming thing a bit by accident, because for me, it was just a hobby, something to have fun, something to do with friends. And I think I did it like casually up until 18 years old, and then I lost interest a bit. And I was looking for a job, and this outsourcing company was sending me to all kinds of unrelated jobs, cleaning garages and doing data entry, this kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Different
And
time.
then different time, yeah. And then I had for the elections in the Netherlands, I was called up to count votes. And I did this for the evening. And then the next day, this guy who was in the outsourcing agency, he called me and he said, like, you can program. I said, yeah, I can. What about it? And he said, why haven't we sent you to any programming jobs? And I'm like, is it more than fun? Is it, can you make a living of this? Can you, and I was like,
Well, that's
wait,
funny.
people want to pay for this?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
then I think it was 20 when I got my first programming job, and rolled from there. And so
That's how that.
eventually I ended up at Level Level. I think it's now 8 years ago. And uh, the interview was with Take, who is the founder of Level Level. He's
Yep.
founded the company 17 years ago. And the interview was drinking beer at the cafe and like seeing if it's a cultural match, and if it is, then welcome aboard. Let's do this. Which was an interesting experience.
That I can imagine. Yeah.
So when I started at Level Level, uh, it was my first experience with professional WordPress. Before I set up some blogs and like some hobby stuff, but first time professionally working with WordPress.
Mhm.
And from there, we developed the agency from, I think it was 8 full-time employees at that time to 32 now, which is pretty cool growth to experience from the first row.
Yeah.
Uh, Now we've got a really exciting team working to make the web a bit better. Uh, we do a lot of accessibility work. We
Yeah.
do a lot of performance work. We make bespoke themes for government, semi-government, NGOs, insurance companies, all kind of clients. And yeah, it's been an exciting time, and more to come.
Yeah. So I was hinting at the accessibility stuff is where Level is I would say more than a little bit invested in. Uh,
Yeah.
Obviously, you have I think one of the premier accessibility experts working for you, Rian Rietveld. Um, what I like about what Level does is you're not making this an optional thing.
Yeah.
At one point, a conscious decision to do it like that, or did that sort of just roll on as things happened, or how did that go?
So in the beginning, when we were selling WordPress, you had to convince people that WordPress was a platform ready for enterprise, right?
Yeah.
There was a lot of worries about security, about scaling, about performance, this kind of stuff.
Yep.
And in every sales pitch, you needed to talk about why WordPress wouldn't be hacked if you do it right, you know? And as the market learned that this isn't a big of an issue, um, the the sales pitch changed to like it's not just a professional platform, but it's a community platform. It's good. It's open source. It's for everyone, by everyone.
Yep.
And this sales pitch, like for everyone, by everyone, naturally leads to everyone must be able to participate.
Yeah.
So in this, we were in this trajectory, and then Rian approach us like, is this something you want to do? And we were already selling it like, um, as you said, as an optional thing before.
Yeah.
And then we said, like, it's doesn't make sense to have it optional because if you don't do it, you're excluding a large part of your potential customer base. So I think in the Netherlands, it's around 15 to 20% that's either permanently or uh, uh, yeah, situationally disabled. So
Yep.
permanently, like everyone can imagine what this means, but there might be some situations in which you uh, perceive a handicap, like maybe you're in a busy train and you can't put music on, so you need to rely on subtitles. Or maybe you're walking around with a kid and you can only use one hand. Or maybe someone's screaming for attention and you can't focus on something you need to do. So there's all types of uh, less permanent, but still very real ways where I want to focus on being as accessible as possible.
That's an interesting extra distinction. I think a lot of people are not fully aware that that's also part of accessibility. I think people tend to think, oh, if you have a visual impairment, maybe you're colorblind, or things of that nature.
Yeah.
Those make a lot of sense to a lot of people, and obviously that's a percentage. I don't know what the percentage is, but to also include the types of scenarios that you just highlighted is, yeah. I mean, I was kind of aware of it, but hearing you list them up as such, I think that to me already is like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, of course, that's also a thing.
So there's also this aspect, at least in the Netherlands, but I think it's in more countries around the world of the population getting older
Yeah,
and living longer. But at the same time, when you get older, your reading ability gets worse. Maybe you get hard of hearing, so you need a hearing aids. Maybe you get less mobile. Maybe you get less savvy with small devices.
yeah,
So it's not just something that uh, happens to someone else. It happens to everyone.
it does.
Everyone eventually is going to need an accessible environment.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good one. So did the um you're building sites for government, semi-government NGOs. That used to be part of my clientele as well. I think I have a few clients left in that area, but what I remember from that is that they had a very strict policy that you needed to adhere to. Like, these are the standards that we want you to make use of.
Yeah.
Were you um, motivated externally in that direction as well by requests from clients, or is it the other way around, that you sort of led the path and said, "Dear client, this is where we need to go. Let us help you get on that path and find the right
Yeah.
way."
So in 2018, it became mandatory for Dutch government entities to
Yep.
be accessible.
Yep.
And I think uh, from 2020, they actually uh, like gave penalties to governments that don't comply, right?
Yeah.
Uh, um, but before that, we were already pushing in the direction of being accessible because it makes sense from a business standpoint to do this. And also, if you're doing it in the early stages of design, of creating a project, it doesn't actually cost that much extra.
Yeah.
It's not really an extra hurdle to take. It's just part of the design requirements. So the earlier you pick it up, the less expensive it becomes to make changes afterward, like this doesn't comply or this should be changed or whatever. So for government entities, we would get these requests afterward anyway. So why not preempt them? Why not get ahead of the things you're gonna have to change anyway?
Yep.
And like you referenced at the start that it's not an option anymore in our product in what we're doing. But from 2025 forward, it's going to be mandatory for pretty much everyone.
Yep.
In the European Union, at least, because there's going to be European Accessibility Act going into work, which is a standardized legislation of which guidelines e-commerce, everyone selling or having a commercial website on the internet should follow.
Yep.
So everyone has to comply in about 2 years. There's no option anymore.
So when's the time to start learning?
Yesterday.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yep.
And that's a huge implication. I have a slight hesitance is not the word, but like a little bit of a skepsis in terms of how much of this is going to be enforced. Because if we look at GDPR type stuff, that's also European mandatory. It is mandatory, and but it's not enforced. It's like it's maybe sometimes a little bit here and there, but cookies, GDPR properly taken care of, it's not happening to the level that I say it instills fear into the whatever person has that much, right? It's we know it needs to be done, but we can get away with it, so you still do. Do you expect this to work differently, or how do you see that?
So the Dutch government hasn't yet made any recommendations about how to enforce these laws, but I would imagine that it's going to be much the same as the GDPR legislation. So I think that means it really applies to businesses making more than 2 million a year in revenue, and the fine is up to 4% on revenue in the states that it works in. So it's more of a way to force the big players to comply.
Yep.
Which they should, because every year we do a research project to the biggest e-commerce shops in the Netherlands.
Yep. Seen them.
Which have some Dutch brands, but also some international brands. And it's insane to me that companies like Amazon or Zalando aren't accessible.
Yeah.
They have the resources. Easily, they have the resources, and still they can't. So part of what's happening, because we've had some interviews with companies in the research project, and what they're saying is there's a mismatch between different departments within the same company. So there's a marketing team or a CRO team, which is running experiments, and their finding in the experiment is that things are converting better if you're making some text light gray. But at the same time, the design team is like, what are you doing? This is like a contrast problem. This is unacceptable, right? So there's multiple interests colliding or conflicting, which causes problems for these big entities. But if you have to, you have to.
Yeah, that's an interesting tension you outline. The whatever you want from a design perspective, whatever you want from a conversion perspective, are not necessarily not for all web building companies is not always the same thing.
Yep.
And then you have marketing, who also has a particular say in how they think things should look. It's a big mix that has a lot of different angles that, um,
It's also technical debt. That's also very often a cause of why things aren't picked up. Because if you're
can you give an example of what technical debt means? 'Cause, I mean,
all right,
I'm assuming
so
people listening know what technical debt mean, but perhaps even explain that a little bit.
so if you're making changes to code, there's multiple ways of getting the same thing done, but there might be one route that's cheaper or easier for a quick experiment or whatever.
Yep.
But it gets harder to change in the long run. So it's harder to maintain this piece of code if it's written quickly, or you're picking a certain framework which might stop getting updated, or maybe you're working with CSS variables, but they're ballooning, right? If you've ever tried this, like at the start you're gonna have 8 colors, and at the end of a project you're gonna have 40. So
Yeah.
it's and the larger in scope a project becomes, and the more shortcuts have been taken while developing it, the harder it becomes to make future changes. And a lot of these platforms are huge in complexity, and they're also uh, they're A/B testing, so there's multiple variations for a single page.
Mhm.
And it becomes so hard to see the full picture and make changes quickly, because if you're changing something on one page, it might break something on the other page. So it becomes really hard, especially for uh, companies that don't have the technical expertise in house to keep up with these developments.
Yeah.
And at the same time, when you're uh, using the WCAG 2.1 or 2.0 guidelines, they're not changing that much that fast. So the basis of accessibility, which is you have to be able to see stuff, you have to be able to interact with stuff, you have to be able to contact and the company behind them.
Yep.
These things haven't changed. They've been refined. They've been
The basics are the same.
enhanced a bit, but the basics have been the same for a decade.
Yeah. 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 So in other words, the best day to start was yesterday, and the second best day is today.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah. So from a technical point of view, you are CTO, so that means a chief technical officer. That means you have a lot to say about the technical direction the company takes. I'm assuming.
Yeah. So uh, it's the way technical decisions get made at level are been in two ways. Uh, I listen to what people here on the floor are saying, like, we want to use this technology, we want to go in this direction,
Yeah.
we want to use this provider or framework, and I analyze the implications of introducing this technology, and then we go forward. So um, there's sometimes officially there's a request for change document,
Yep.
uh, in which a proposal is made. How would this change impact the company? What are the resources that are required to implement this? And then we move forward. At the same time, uh, sometimes you just have to make a choice as the manager, which is not my strong point. Or sometimes you just have to say no,
Yep.
which is also hard and not always fun. But like those are the two ways that
That
things get done.
that last one is a good example of. I don't think anybody likes that per se. right? So if um, there's a way of uh, if you're forcing yourself to be authoritative, that's I don't care if you feel like you are an authoritative person or not. That I don't think that ever works well in terms of you have an idea, you want other people to understand your idea and eventually start liking that idea. Um, and ideally, you want to win people over, right, with arguments and examples and logic as to why that is the right decision. Just taking the decision and cutting everybody out in terms of how you got there. I'm not saying
Mm.
that in terms of satisfaction is much less than somebody says, this is a problem we need to solve, and we apparently need to solve it repeatedly. So we need to think of a framework for this. So let's
Yeah.
all let's all see what we can find as a framework, and then um, there's a group decision, and you ultimately make the decision. That's a different route. Um,
Yeah.
I can see how that would not be always like, hey, this is my favorite thing to do in the job. The technical part, sure, but
Yeah. So this is all also like, uh, you talk about this with James Giroux, I think
Drew,
his name is, uh, um, about growing from a technical role into a leadership role,
yeah, yeah,
and and it's not the same thing. Uh, for me, it was like going from high school to college. Like in high school, you know what's expected of you, and you're like the biggest kid in the classroom, and then suddenly you're going to college and you have to reinvent yourself. You have to do something else. You're uh, in an unknown space, and you have to think about like, how am I going to do this? I haven't been to school for this. I don't know how to resolve these conflicts.
yeah. But you're
So that's really been a gigantic learning curve for me.
yeah.
Uh, Very exciting as well because I like learning new things, but it's fun and exciting, and also quite hard and I call this uncomfortable sometimes. But
Well, growth
that
is
makes it fun.
I think it's important to understand that growth in of itself is uncomfortable. If growth feels like it's a very comfortable thing to do, then I don't think you're really growing. Um,
Yeah.
the podcast you're referring to is with James Giroux, and we indeed talked about how someone who is great at their role from a technical standpoint doesn't necessarily translate into a great manager. Those two are not the same, nor should they be treated as such. I think it's pretty rare for somebody going from a senior technical role to actual management and having the skills for that. That is a very small subset of senior uh, people, whether that's technical or not.
So to be honest, I don't have the skill set for this, but I'm learning. I'm
I, I
trying to
think
get
you
there.
do. I think you do. Otherwise, you wouldn't be in this position. You have part of that skill set. There's perhaps a portion that you still need to get comfortable with or learn, um, broaden yourself in or deepen yourself in terms of knowledge, but you have an innate ability to do it. Otherwise, you wouldn't be in this role. I know Tacker well enough to know that he wouldn't put you in that role if that quality wasn't already there.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, that's y- y- you sort of led on in like how you kind of stumbled into code, uh, then finding um, reward was actually an option.
Yeah.
Other people paying you for it. Um, when you moved to WordPress for like truly starting building complex stuff, what was the? I'm curious. Is there a moment when you went like, ah, okay, I get it. This is how it's supposed to be done.
So at the previous company I worked for, we had a pretty small development team of three people, and we were very straight in making decisions, to making our own choices of how to work.
Yep.
And there I went from being novice developer or hobbyist developer into really learning it as a craft.
Yep.
And after that, when I moved to Level Level and to WordPress, the from day one, the thing that struck me as awesome with WordPress was that I didn't have to validate everything from a form perspective, right? So if you're working in pure PHP and you're making a form, you have to check every single thing it's required. Is it the correct length? Is it this? Is it that?
Yep.
And when I came in here, we were using advanced custom fields,
Yep.
and
Yep.
it does everything in this direction for you. Like I want to get a coordinate from the user. Right. So here's a map and they can click it. This would cost me, I think, 20 hours development before when doing it all yourself and making a good user experience for it.
Yep.
And within WordPress, it's like 5 minutes, you're done. So this was like the power of WordPress, which from day one, it was obvious. But at the same time, at the previous company, we were using some workflows that are accepted in the PHP world.
Yeah.
Like using Composer to manage your dependencies and using a deploy tool or continuous deployments instead of like logging into a server and copy pasting a zip file.
Yeah.
So when I came in to Level Level, there's been quite a few things that I was like, we can do this better. This doesn't have to be a manual workflow. This doesn't have to be like some individual heroics to keep a website up straight.
Yeah.
we can like structure this and automate this. So that took, I think, about a year to get some of these standard workflows into this. And then from that point on, we started working on code reviews. We started working on automated testing. We started working on infrastructure as code.
Truly professional.
For deployments. Right. Taking it to another level. And I think we've succeeded in getting a pretty good ecosystem or technical environment here at Level Level, which allows us to manage a lot of projects quickly or efficiently.
Yep. I think you would have to, as soon as you start growing as a company, you need to have your processes in place. Otherwise, you're never going to be efficient. So you end up wasting huge amounts of hours. You have to have processes in place. If you look at the stuff happening in WordPress, right, that is available to us nowadays, we've seen, I'd say we've seen a huge uptick of possibilities that in code at our disposal. Most recently, obviously, the block editor, which the WordPress 6.3 is impending, which will hugely improve, in my opinion, on the site editor. So the full site editing themes, I think we're still calling them. I'm unsure. Yeah, correct wording here is, but
yeah.
What is your opinion on that in terms of what WordPress brings to the table over the years? Is that in line with what you as an agency building high profile sites for governments and with accessibility in mind? Is WordPress providing you what it needs to provide you there, or are you building your whole subset of tools and systems and frameworks around that so you sort of circumvent that? I know that's a long question, but
yeah. So it's a bit of a mixed bag. We've been working with Gutenberg, the block editor, since it was in beta.
Yep.
So before 5.0 came out, we were building our own website in the block editor. And I think it's one of the best developments to come to WordPress since I've been in the WordPress ecosystem.
Yep.
Um, I couldn't imagine uh, not having it with all of its flaws.
Yep.
It's still like a superior user experience for someone editing to be able to see what they're doing and seeing the results in the editor, as opposed to uh, having to preview, wait, preview, wait, preview, wait, but actually seeing what you're doing. At the same time, um, there's a lot of freedom that's by default enabled within the block editor that allows a customer to make a circus of their website, right? So um, uh, we're a full service agency, and we have a design in house, and we have user interaction experts in house, and we have accessibility experts in house, and these all have a crucial role in creating the website and the layout and the flows that a user takes and the customer journey takes,
Yeah.
which customers pay us for. And if you then deliver them a website in which they can create their own color palettes or go off grid and create their own columns and style, or even like creating their own full site editing experience.
Yeah.
It's a bit like what is the experience of the expertise you're paying for. So
Yeah.
where we're adding value with our expertise, we're often like circumventing or disabling features in the editor. But at the same time, it's bringing a really exciting workflow for users to create and edit pages. And I think if you are looking into the future and you're going to maybe get a collaborative editing in the future, which allows multiple people to edit posts and work together on creating an article or leaving in content comments on pieces of content within the editor. That was something that wouldn't be possible at all with the classic editor. It would
No,
be out of the question.
not by all.
So that's a very exciting development that I'm really looking forward to having. Yeah. So it's a bit of mixed bag in how we're using it.
Do you disable a lot? Like, would you say on maybe not just the block editor, but in general, like clients ending up with the site? Do you consciously say, okay, this type of client, we're just gonna turn a few things off? Do you go in do a project
Of
like
course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because even without considering the block editor or full site editing or whatever, we don't allow the customer to install their own plugins, or don't allow them to edit files on the server, or because we're managing this for them. We're giving guarantees that a site functions in a certain way.
I'm of the same opinion.
So we have to block some of these things down to guarantee correct behavior of the website. Also, we have very rigorous testing workflows for updating websites, updating plugins, updating dependencies.
Yep.
We create websites with connections to maybe 10 outside tools. So we're monitoring that these things work well. Yeah, but we need to limit the customer's ability to some point.
I hear you, but
to be able to give the guarantees.
I'm asking because I also know a few companies build high-end stuff that just generally still give a lot of freedom to the end client because the client sort of demands it. Like, I need this, whatever compliance reasons they can think of, and And then I go look at some of my clients, and I go like, they can you give me FTP access, please? And I go, no, but here's a question for you: why would you want it?
Yeah.
And there's always a thing that they come up with that makes sense in their head because they've been told whatever. And you go, like, no, no, we have a better solution for that because you're paying me to manage your site, right? You're paying me to maintain it, keep it up and running. So yeah, I tend to leave the dashboard fairly accessible um, uh, in terms of what's available to them. But yeah, with full site editor, especially I haven't checked um, if you're an admin, then it doesn't always make sense for that administrator to have full access to the site editor. I think that's something that's becoming a little bit more difficult to control.
Yeah.
Then you would want them to have access to the menus. So
So what are features that you're looking forward to going to future versions of WordPress, or
well,
something you on the roadmap that you're going to, this is a game changer?
translations. I for the longest time think we're running way behind on looking at the multilingual world of WordPress, which is huge, which is far more than 50% of all install bases are
Mhm.
in a different language. And I don't actually know what the percentages of the number of multilingual sites are,
Mhm.
but there are many. Like there's
Yeah.
countries that have it as an obligation. Um, Switzerland being the prime example, but there's obviously Belgium. Um, there's also here where I live in the northern part of the Netherlands, Friesland. We have government sites in Frisian and in Dutch, so it's very close to home. Um, yeah, that to me is the biggest big thing. I like this because you refer to phase 3 of the Gutenberg project, where the collaborative part is being explored and implemented.
Yeah.
I have less with that. I'm more curious about phase 4, which is the internationalization as a whole.
Yeah.
Short term, I'm very excited for 6.3 actually. 6.3 brings, that's the third edition of WordPress that brings huge performance benefits. And I love performance.
Mhm.
I love it when stuff is fast. And
Yeah.
I like seeing this as a pattern now, like the WordPress core performance team, what they keep outputting on a regular basis. Johnny Harris, my first guest on the podcast, being a good example of a good representative of that team.
Yeah. I think you talked about the WordPress post meta being lazy loaded
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
in 6.3. So yeah,
that has a huge
good
implication
problem.
for a very large array of sites.
Yeah.
Not having to have everything in memory from,
Yeah.
but be able to lazy load it as you go, as you actually interact with it. It's things like that that just makes sense. Like why didn't we do that before?
It's all.
Different
Yeah.
focuses. Um,
Yeah. So I think that's part of it, like taking the performance baseline of
mhm,
WordPress to a higher level.
yeah,
Um, but at the same time, I'm also noticing that the uh, biggest challenges that we run into with performance is just stupid stuff.
mm,
Sorry for being rude about it, but
no,
um,
but I think I need to hear an example to confirm what your subset of stupid is. But I think I tell what you mean.
so some time ago, I had to debug a plugin because we're using Redis on our website. So we're using Till Cruise plugin,
Yep, you
which
cache
you
probe.
will also had on the podcast.
Yep.
Uh, um, and we were seeing uh, like 6 megabyte payloads going into Redis and out of Redis on every single request.
Wow.
And we're like, why is the website downloading 6 megabytes from Redis on every single request? So we're debugging, and there's this plugin that's writing log files into the options table with autoload on. So there's just a 4 megabyte option in the WordPress options table that it's loading on every single request, which is
That doesn't scale.
that doesn't scale.
No.
So this is an example. Like there's a lot of low hanging fruit within the ecosystem, and at the same time, that's why WordPress is interesting, because you just contact the person who's building it and go like, we found something and you might want to change it. Here's some suggestions, and maybe
I'm
they'll
assuming-
implement it.
I'm assuming that they didn't do it intentionally, like with an idea behind
No,
that made sense.
no. It's just lack of knowing better.
Yeah, yeah.
It's, just what's the easiest way to do something? This works, and we're
Sample.
testing it on a site with 3 posts, so it works, right?
This is a great
then,
example of technical debt built in right there.
Yeah. So we had another example, which is like stupid when you find out, but at the same time, it's a scenario that doesn't. I expect it not to be on the standard list of things to test, right?
Yeah.
So on our bigger clients, we're horizontally scaling the sites. So this means that we're using multiple web servers to render a single site.
Mhm.
And when you're doing this, you're dealing with uploads being on multiple different servers.
Yeah.
So what we're doing is we're creating a network share that all servers connect to, and they're storing their uploads in this directory, right? So what was happening was there's this plugin, and it writes a directory within the uploads folder
Yeah.
with a semi-random name, and it puts an index.php file in the root of the folder, so you can access the folder accidentally. Like if you're a bad guy and you guess the name of the folder, you don't want to see what's in it, right?
Yep.
So this works on ordinary WordPress installations, but as soon as you're moving the uploads folder into Amazon, like the S3 buckets,
Yep.
and there's a symlink going from a deeper folder back up, it's going into an endless loop of trying to write index.php folders. And we were seeing like this sawtooth profile of memory being eaten, like every single time that a cron was starting, it was trying to do this, getting into an endless loop and then being killed and trying to reproduce it locally, can't do it. So at the end, we ended up profiling it with PHP spy on the live server.
Yep.
So what it does is it takes snapshots of what PHP is doing at certain intervals.
Yep.
And then stacking these on top of each other. So, it's rendering page now. It's grabbing a form now. It's grabbing something from database now. And it takes these snapshots like for a minute, stacks everything on top of each other, and then says it was mostly doing this.
Yep.
And then it was like 99% writing a file of index.php to this directory.
Yeah.
Why is this happening? What's it doing?
That's a cool tool. PHP spy.
Yeah. So
I'm sure to add it in the show notes.
if you have a regular profiler that you're running locally,
yeah,
you're tracing every single function call.
Yep.
And it puts a little bit of overhead on every single call that's being made. So everything gets a bit slower. And this ends up being like 2 to 3 times slower than without profiling.
Yeah.
The thing about PHP Spy is that it doesn't monitor every function going in and out, but it just like 20 times per second takes a snapshot of what is it doing now? What is it doing now? What is it doing now? So it's for live environments where you don't want to increase load 3 to 4 times. This is awesome because with really uh, few added resources, you can get an insight into what your production server is doing.
That's a cool suggestion because oftentimes people tell me like, we need to figure out on the server what's happening, and they'll suggest something like New Relic. And I know New Relic doesn't necessarily have the memory and resource footprint as it used to, but it's
Mm,
still adding to us. If you have a busy site, it's
yeah,
it's definitely adding to your footprint. And it doesn't always make sense to have such a thing hogging your
yeah.
resources, even
So,
especially when there's a solution like PHP Spy that would solve the same problem and not have the resource issues. I like that.
yeah, yeah. So there's um, a bit of uh, a multi-level debugging process that we use. Like we're using Sentry
Yep.
to uh, uh, create traces of about 1% of all requests going to the website.
Yep.
So we constantly have background monitoring of what was the performance at a certain time, going 90 days into the past. So if something suddenly gets slow or a customer writes an email like things became slow, we can see like, is this something that's happening now, or has this always been like this? And is this just like an instance that they're uh, considering? Then we have uh, like the standards MySQL dump slow, like slow logs, PHP logs that are constantly uh, gathering data. And we have a workflow where we can increase the number of traces that we're doing. So if there's a performance problem, we can up the number of traces to see which kind of processes are taking most of the resources.
Yep.
And sometimes we install tools like Query Monitor on websites to get a bit more live view of what's actually happening or
Yeah.
what resources are being used. And then we have like really high tech tools like LSOF to find open files, uh, PHP Spy to index like what is the server actually doing. Uh, Redis Monitor to find out what Redis is doing. My top to find out what MySQL is doing. Like all these specialized tools for debugging certain situations.
I like my top as well. It's not a lot of people understand um, how to debug a database. Mostly because people don't, quite possibly, I'm assuming here, but from the feedback that I've gotten, they don't fully understand what a database is. And it's a relatively flat thing in and of itself, even though it's not flat, but like base concept of this is how it works and this is how it works. There's not a lot of wiggle room in how it works.
Mhm.
Um, to then be able to have a tool that sort of intercepts what's happening. I've seen many cases where my top just tells you in like the first command, like, okay, here we go, this is it.
Yeah.
Move on.
And this query is locking the table for 30 seconds and nothing else is getting through. Okay.
Yeah,
Makes sense.
yeah. This doesn't look like behavior we want. What's going on here?
Yeah.
No, those are cool tools. I like those. The my top is a good reference again to mention, and PHP Spy I'm definitely going to check out. So last question for you, because I think we're closing up on the hour. Uh,
Can I give a question that I've been waiting to ask you as
oh
well?
yeah, sure,
And
of course.
so you've organized tons of WordPress WordCamp gatherings, and I can imagine that there's recurring challenges that you've seen since organizing the first WordCamp Europe in Leiden up
Yeah.
until June this year in Athens. What are the recurring challenges that you think, like, every single time we're organizing this? Why is this happening? Why is this still the challenge? Why are we still having so much problems with this?
Hmm. That's a good question. So I think I don't know. I stopped counting, but I think I'm in somewhere in the 20 different WordCamps that I've organized in one way or another.
Yeah.
WordCamp Netherlands and then WordCamp Europe and WordCamp North Nederland. Yay. Um, I think the most difficult thing still is communication. And it's a very, very easy one to use because, isn't life about miscommunication in and of itself? Yes. But in terms of an event, um, people have an expectancy of what is going to be there. And whether that is, for instance, the diversity of the speaker team, or whether that is the availability of sponsor packages and what is in them and what is not included in them. In communicating the tickets, like what am I getting as an email confirmation? What information is in there? There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff that, when taken care of correctly, will take away a lot of insecurities, uncertainties, and just general lacks of information. So what I see still happening is certain things just not being communicated on time, and there's often very, very valid reasons for it. For instance, WordCamp Netherlands, we sent out the confirmation of who was selected for presentation this September, and we were a week late. Now there were many reasons why that was, but you're so busy in your work because you're doing this on the side, but you're so busy in the work of selecting, and there's stuff coming up as you're doing that, that you forgot to mention, hey, we're running a little bit late, which is, for instance, something that I think we should have mentioned in an email, and you didn't. Now,
Yeah.
most are fine with that, but some go like, no, I've been waiting till the end of first week of July. I haven't heard anything, so I'm assuming I'm not selected. So that's a good example of where communication is always something that is never, you can hardly over communicate. Let's put it like that. So I think my biggest lessons till this day still is strive to get as close as possible to over communicate.
Yeah.
That's not just your presentation on
Over
your website.
communicating.
Hmm?
Over communicating.
Well,
This is
it may seem, feel like you're over communicated, but you rarely are.
No, but then this I noticed this in my daily job as well. I'm like, I called a couple of people yesterday, and I called a couple of people today, and like, you need to get the message out to everyone,
Yeah.
and need to get the message out often more than once,
Yeah.
because sometimes it goes past, and people think about other things, and or hear conflicting messages or whatever, and then you need to remind them this is
I'll give you
what the
another
vision is.
example. I'll give you another. This is a mini event what you and I are having right now. You filled out a form. You picked a date and a time. You filled out a form, and upon hitting submit, you were redirected to another form. In that form, I ask a few things.
Yeah.
The first version of that form and the confirmation you got upon submitting of my form is quite different from what is currently there. And that's because I keep learning on little things of feedback, like how does this work? How does that work? What do I should take into account for this? The current version says something explicitly about make sure you're in a room that has a little bit of to no echo. Get a microphone if you can have one, a separate one, and also in terms of preparation, I book a slot of 90 minutes, but the recording is not 90 minutes. We have 30 minutes to figure out stuff, which in our case we need, for instance, a good example. So these are the things that you learn. So it's not just communicating, it's also learning of the feedback that you intentionally or unintentionally get, and then incorporate it in your future communication. So yeah, it's that was an interesting question, because I genuinely think that the communication part is the hardest part of anything in the realm of collaborating with other people. And whether there is those people buy a ticket from you, whether they're speaking, whether they're sponsoring, whether they're showing up for the speaker sponsor dinner in terms of an event, that's always the thing that you never over communicate. I've never heard anybody say, look, you send me 6 emails now, it's enough, I'm opting out. I never heard anybody say that.
Yeah. Especially for something they've sought out by themselves. Like, I want to go to
Exactly.
WordCamp. I want to speak at WordCamp. And then, yeah.
No, that would be my answer. So from the very first time that I organized one, which is 2009, till the current one that I'm organizing, WordCamp Netherlands 2023 in September, that is a consistent thing, because we work with varying teams, right? It's never the same team. So I had certain responsibilities lie with somebody else, different combination of people, that means stuff is going to change. And that's very hard to continue. So if it's just me or 2 or 3 other people, then you have rules within your little team. It's much easier. But if you have a fluctuating team, it's very hard.
Yeah.
Have communication be on point all the time. It's just difficult. That's the downside of, I guess, working with volunteers. That's a good question. I like it. And now I forgot what my final question to you was. So good one. Good diversion.
Dodged it.
I guess so. Well, on that note, then, thank you for being on the podcast. I've enjoyed this conversation. I think a lot of people, having listened to it, have learned a lot about accessibility and how it's an integral, or should be an integral part of whatever you're doing. We talked about fulfillment stuff as well, so that's always a favorite of mine. So yeah, thank you so much.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you for asking.